We have here presenting two of our most passionate global HR enthusiasts and best presenter, and they're going to talk about different ways to report off of global HR. And with that, I give you Matt and Melissa.
Thanks, Keith. So today, Matt and I are going to be presenting a topic that we've been hearing lately from some customers that have no idea how to get reports out of GHR. Anything outside of standard delivered that they've been told, and then potentially Spreadsheet Designer, which we're going to cover here. So we really wanted to define all the ways you're able to get data out of the system. So do you want to just kick us off?
Sure. So yeah, like Melissa said, there's a lot of data we know that is in GHR, but that getting it out is, even with the delivered reports, a lot of times there's not enough content there. There's not enough depth of the reporting that you really need. Especially if you're coming from the S3 world, or you've been using, an ODBC connection for years and years and years to get to the back end.
And you're easy to get to that SQL,
right.
SQL database or Crystal reports, right?
Yeah, so you're used to getting it that way, and it's not as easy to extract it from GHR. You can get it that way, but there's a lot of things that are built in, so you might not even have to go to that layer of Crystal or through that ODBC connection. So let's dig in and talk about a couple of things that come right out of the box. First things first, there are a lot of delivered reports in there. They have been designed by Infor. They're kind of, I don't want to say they're ready to go right away. There is some configuration that you have to set up, but they are provided for you, and there's relatively minimal setup. You don't have to build anything fully from scratch on this. Things like affirmative action reporting and EEO reporting, the VETS 100, and like when I'm saying the EEO report, it's the EEO 1, the EEO 4 and 5. It also does now.
Yep.
Your VETS 100, like I say, you've got your OSHA log, you've got ACA reporting, your turnover, your starters and leavers. But let's talk about a couple of those, a couple of the setup requirements, first of all. When you're looking at your EEO and AAP reports, obviously you're familiar with them. You need to make sure that you've got those EEO codes and the EEO subcategory, the census code, I believe it's called.
Yeah, and there'll be some workers' comp categories and state codes. All of those, don't assume that what you have in the system today is valid. You want to ensure that you've gone to your state reporting site, ensure that all of your state codes are correct, workers' comp codes have been audited and cleaned up, because you don't want to send bad data out. Bad data that's in your system will be reported on with the government, and your report can't fix that.
Right. And a lot of times when you're looking at those specifically, those are going to be attached to your job, specifically on job country attributes. A lot of these reports, the EEO specifically, is always going to be calling out a specific job country attribute category. So you're going to be looking for that. Make sure that those are set up the right way. Even things like location codes, make sure that those are set up the right way. If you don't have that right, a lot of your EEO reporting is going to be wrong. Your VETS reporting is going to be wrong. Make sure that those are in sync with what is real for your organization. And then at even a higher level, something like the VETS reporting, they may change the veteran categories. Make sure that those are up to date. You can attach them in the system. You should be tracking those in GHR. GHR is designed to be your system of record. So if you've got it set up the right way, you're going to be able to produce these reports.
And that's a good point. When should you do that? We think about year end. There's always a series of things you do at the end of the year to close out your system, to do some other reporting. Throw that on your year-end checklist to go out there in January and check your state reporting codes, check your VETS 100 codes, ensure that everything that's in your system hasn't changed for regulatory reporting.
Yeah, and you might even see something like that happen mid-year or at the beginning of a tax year, especially this past year with the tax changes. There were a lot of things that ended up changing. Not too many of these codes that we're talking about, but it's a good time to check. New tax year as well. So.
A couple of ones that we didn't really talk about right now are the turnover and starter and leavers. So any of you that have an S3 system, that have HCM and S3, you're used to your starter and leaver report there. You still have it out here. It's going to give you the listing of all of your new hires, your rehires, and then anyone that's terminated for the time period that you've defined. So that's still there. Your turnover, that's kind of a A big thing that I think Infor pushes is like, yeah, you've got out-of-the-box turnover reporting, and it's not as easy as just running a job or setting up a couple of parameters, because everybody's turnover, the way they slice and dice the data is different. So Infor couldn't create just one or two types. I mean, there'll be an annual turnover, and I think there's a quarterly turnover that's defined. But if you need to define, further define by organization unit or by certain groups that you want to understand, if it's turnover, if it's internal, people are moving out of a job and moving to another job, that's not true turnover. They're just leaving their position. So there's different configurations that you can do to get to all of the turnover needs that you have. Just don't expect them to just kind of be like a checkbox or a flip switch that you can do.
Right,
Do you have any?
Yeah, the turnover report really is interesting in that regard, especially for transfers, because again, what is a transfer? What does it really mean? Infor has a very specific definition, but it might not match what your organization is. Even if you have multiple companies within the same organization, if you've set up your org structure that way, would that be counted as turnover or not?
Right.
Does it actually count as a start and a leave? Yeah. So you do have to kind of watch out for that. The turnover reporting, like I said, some people really like it, some people don't really care for it all that much. A lot of people really do like that starters and leavers report though. That's very configurable. You can do a lot of things with it.
And share it out to whomever you need. If it's your payroll department, your managers of your organization that need to understand. So that way they don't necessarily need security to go into loss or go into Infor and find all of this information themselves. They can get this report that you've published out or you've CSV'd out and send it to them.
Right. All right. So moving on. Oh, yes. Sorry, we have a question.
How do we access the starter leaver report?
Okay, so I'm going to have to try to remember from the screenshot in my mind right now.
It should just be either administrator or generalist.
Yep.
There's a reporting
Reporting is
icon
a subtab.
or a sub or
Yep.
tab, however you're accessing it, rich client or XML.
Right. Yeah, so right inside there under reports, you should see starters and leavers.
It'll be a listing. You'll have just an arrow, and it'll list most of those reports that you saw there. And if you don't have access to that, that's where you do need to talk to your security administrator. You talk to somebody in HR first to see if you're able to get that access, and then ask your security administrator to ensure that you have that
Right.
icon or tab.
The one time I don't take a screenshot of going down the start menu, that gets asked. Okay, so moving on. Talking about cubes. Cubes is something that, there's something that really kind of are almost a buzzword nowadays when we're talking about deeper business intelligence and data cubes. A lot of people really have that fundamental question of, what are cubes? I don't really understand what this is. We're used to a very simple, straightforward table structure. Cubes, when you get right down to it, for a non-technical person such as myself, you can really think of it as a table with extra dimensions added onto it. So not only do we know that Melissa has this value in this field by itself, the cube actually will add the dimension of time to it. So we'll know that she had that value on this date, and then there's another dimension that says on this other date it was this value. So it kind of goes back. So if you're plotting it out on like an XY axis, it's adding that layer of depth onto it. So from a very poor layman's terms.
Well, yeah, and that's really big because everybody's always had a really hard time reporting on history. Whether it's GHR system or it's the S3 system, you want to get the history of a field, any personnel action changes, and it's never been something that you could get and rely on. You pull it 3 times and you get 3 different record counts essentially. So being able to have this cube functionality that I think will allow you to pull that and define it a little better is pretty exciting, I think.
Right, and really when you get down to it, GHR by itself is really built on these cubes, and you don't even realize it a lot of the times. If you're familiar with GHR, you're used to looking at the audit log. The audit log is basically a way for us to see that cube data. So we can see that dimension of time, and we can see exactly when that field changed, and we also see a little bit more information about it. We know who made the change, what the reason code is, all of that peripheral data. We can also see the other data that was static at that time. So they're very, very powerful when you get down to it. And we just already did mention a couple cube reports that are used frequently. Turnover and starters and leavers. That's one of the basic cubes that you see all the time. If you're using talent acquisition, your time to fill analysis, that information is all stored in this cube data as well. So they're not as scary as they might sound, or I might make them sound right now. But
I think the bottom line is it's a lot of information that non-technical people can get to without having to learn a lot of technical tools, right?
Right, exactly. So don't let business intelligence scare you. Don't run away from it. If you are interested in learning more about business intelligence, definitely check out the webinar that we've got on Thursday morning, Burst, Not Your Father's BI. It's really interesting to see the Burst product that's I guess replacing the old LBI system.
IBI,
Right,
LBI
sorry,
and IBI. And Burst, I think, is still a product that's coming along with. I know for a while there's been some free trials that you can go in and check it out and create some things. So check out the presentation, play around with it, and see if it's a tool that would be useful for your organization.
So moving on to personalization. So this is where we really get into the kind of that creative aspect of reporting in GHR. So
yeah, and I know you'll talk a little bit more about it, but back when GHR kind of first started out, the early versions, and not 3.4.2, but the 10.0 version, we won't go that far back.
No.
That was, I think we'll call that was still a Lawson product. So the N4 version 10, personalizations were not really utilized too much because there was, and we'll get into a little bit of the security behind it, but there were some areas that if your person did a personalization in their department, it would overwrite anything you as an administrator would push out globally. So for years, people just turned them off, didn't give security to any of their end users to use personalizations, and you guys out there may still have that. So let's talk about what personalizations mean today and what's behind it, so you can maybe give it a second chance.
Sure. So when we look at personalizations, they really are a great tool, especially for our super users, the people who are out there dealing with data on a daily basis. They sound like they're something that might be more of an administrative level or a higher level at IT, but in all reality, it's good for our super users to be able to use those. The thing to remember with those, and you're going to hear this theme hit over and over again, landmark security is embedded within these. So even if I have a personalization which has a bunch of information, say pay rates for certain people, if that user does not have access to see that person, they're not going to be able to see it. It doesn't matter. The security is always going to be underneath everything else. That's like the first layer that's always going to be looked at. A lot of times people, when they're using personalizations, they can start to eliminate their crystal reports or get rid of a big chunk of them because we can get the data pretty quickly and pretty easily. The nice thing is, as well, we're using the business class logic that's built into Landmark. When we do that, you don't have to do the linking through 15 other tables. If you know that the reason code on this action was, say, promotion, we don't have to go and figure out what that was, or if it was just like P3 or something like that. That can mean promotion to third, to status 3. You can do that, and it's built-in logic. You don't have to go too far to find that. You don't have to figure out that PERSAC HIST table and all that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of built in there. And my running joke always with anything with personalizations and all of GHR, when you get right down to it, is I like to eliminate the phone calls. We're going to give you a lot of information. I'm going to give you personalization access, so you don't have to call HRIS to go and say, all right, can I get a report that shows these 3 things? I'm going to give you personalization access.
Right.
I know it's secured. You can't get to things you're not supposed to. don't call me, just run the report yourself. So.
And if anybody out there is still in S3 and you use Smart Office, personalizations kind of feels a lot like Smart Office, where you're able to, default values in, you're able to remove fields or labels that you don't really need because you don't use them for your screens. So if you're familiar with the Smart Office functionality, kind of think of that a little on the personalizations, where just that one user at their own computer with their own login is making changes to the way they interface with the Infor system.
The worst case scenario on a personalization, if I create a personalization and it absolutely blows up and I can't see that list anymore because I put an extra filter on it or something like that, it doesn't matter. Melissa can still do her work. I just screwed up my personalization and that's it.
Yeah.
So we're not destroying the system for everybody else.
For everybody else, right.
So yeah, one of the questions that people always have then, like Melissa said, was that overall security, and the number of times we've talked to people about that, and well wait, I built all these configurations. Well, what's going to happen if somebody personalizes it? Don't worry about that when you get right down to it. First of all, personalization is only going to affect that one user. The configurations, if you look at how a screen renders within GHR, you're starting with your base code, you're putting configurations over top of it, and then you're putting personalizations over top of it. If they screw up their personalization, it's just going to jump down to the configurations. If the configuration is messed up, it's just going to go down to the base LPL. We're going to see that screen the way it was meant to be rendered to begin with. But if you're worried about people overriding your configurations, if you've added 15 fields that are really, really important and you're concerned that the end user is not going to see those, there's a button right here in Configuration Console now that says Override Personalizations. We can make sure that even if a user does have a personalization, we're overriding it with our new, very nice, hot, new customization.
Yeah,
our new configuration change is going to go to that user as well. We can absolutely do that. So
Yeah, and that was missing for a lot of versions.
Yes.
So that makes this, really, it makes it functionality that you can actually start utilizing and sending, because it's great functionality and you don't want to hide half of it from your end users, which could make things a lot easier and more efficient for them. So we're all really pretty stoked when that came out.
So in case you're not familiar with how you would actually build out a personalization, just kind of talk about this in a reporting sense. A lot of our reports, when you get right down to it, are based off of lists of information. So when we're looking at something like a basic employee list, so I'm looking at all of our work assignments here, but let's just say that I needed to add one more field. I need to add start date on there. So I've got my information, I've got the people's names, their ID numbers, information about their work assignment, their basic job information. That's great, but I need that one extra piece. So all we have to do is go into the little double chevrons over here and scroll down to Options and Personalize. When we do that, we're presented with a menu saying, okay, well, what do you want to do? And we can click on that little add field. When we do that, it's invoking this next list, which is showing you all the fields that you can start to put on that list without having to do extra coding or anything like that. It's right there, it's at your fingertips. Just plop that field on there and you're going to be able to see it display right on that list. That list has now been personalized. They can also go through and do some other things. We'll talk about exporting them in just a couple minutes. We've got that. They can get their own data. To make a phone call to get the data from somebody else.
So Matt, if I create this, when I shut down my computer and I log in tomorrow, is it still going to be there? Or
It
does it
still will
disappear?
be there. Yep, it
Okay.
will be there as long
Yeah.
as you keep it active.
Okay.
Think we have a question?
Yes. Is the personalization security still open to both form changes and list changes? We would like to only allow list changes, but not form changes, and have been told that wasn't possible in the past.
I believe that's still the case, where you still are able to, there's just the one personalization role. That being said, there's probably a couple back-end ways for us to make sure that we don't let people change up forms.
Yeah.
There's always a way, I feel
LPL.
like. LPL, yeah. It's something we could do deep in either security or in configuration console itself to prevent that kind of information.
Yeah, so if you're digging around, again, the best thing to always do is make a copy of the standard delivery, the standard template. It'll be personalization_ST, and make a copy of that. And then with the new one, go into that LPL and look for the call outs wherever it's being updated, and you can either comment it out or delete it out and test it out. I believe that, if you want to, like I said, if you're digging around there and you want to try and see if you can figure it out, then that's the best way to play around. Never change your personalization_ST. Anything that has an _ST, never touch that one. Just make a copy and then push that one out.
No touchy-wutchy on those. So there's also a couple ways where, when you talk about the overall philosophy of how you roll personalizations out, if you're concerned about people doing that when they shouldn't be, you really have to question whether or not we even give them that role.
Right.
So, and then you can do some things on the back end. If they had a personalization on a form, write a process flow to deactivate it or something like that. You've got a couple different plays on it. So, when we talk about personalizations, let's just say that Melissa went and she built this awesome personalization on this list.
Thank you.
Yes. And I come over to her desk one day and I see that. I'm like, this is awesome. I really want to see it. We know it's not going to be applied to everybody in the entire organization. So what can I do at this moment? So the nice thing about this is, because everything in GHR, all these personalizations, all these configurations are stored as database records, which means I can actually borrow that database record from Melissa and get her personalization and put it onto my record. So it's kind of nice. Depending upon whether or not you give people security to be able to see this, like in the start menu of GHR, if you look for user, form, user, list, user, menu, etc., you're actually going to be able to you're going to find all the configurations and all the personalizations that are out there. And then at that point, you can come in, I can find exactly which personalization on which list Melissa has. And then when I open that up, I'm actually going to be able to see this section right inside here. I know it's hard to see on the webinar, but right in here, there's a little section called LPL. That's our landmark pattern language. This is the actual personalization that Melissa made. I can then take that and put it onto my own personalization. And I've got the exact same thing that she had. So a question that might come up on that is, are we going to allow this kind of thing?
Right.
And that really comes down to a rollout philosophy, whether or not you're going to allow people to access those user business classes, and whether or not we're going to even let people do personalizations at all.
So they could personalize, but maybe IT or super user might be the only one that could go in and copy those personalizations and share them. That could be an option too. So that way you're not giving a ton of security, or people can actually potentially, and when, like you said, it doesn't really mess it up, because even if they give them a personalization that they fat finger a key or two in there, it just won't work, and their base code or their configuration will work anyway. So
yeah, and we've seen that happen at a couple clients where we know that Melissa has that awesome awesome personalization. We just ask an administrator at that point, hey, could you copy that personalization and give it to me as well? And they'll be able to do that. So.
Yeah, because this feels like it's a little more technical to figure out and do if you're just the regular end user, HR user, or I guess nowadays financials or supply chain. Everybody who's on Landmark, it's a little more difficult to get to remember how to navigate to this, I think.
Right.
So yeah.
Nope, thought we had a question. Sorry.
Okay.
Nope.
Let's go ahead and move on to the custom reporting.
Okay, so when we talk about custom reporting, if you've gone into your GHR system, I'm sure that you've seen that start menu and you've got create, and then you can do a whole bunch of things. We're going to talk about some of those things because they really do tie in very well with reporting. The first of which, obviously, is the create report, which has a lot to do with reporting because it's reporting. So The nice thing about this is we're going to be using all of our standard delivered business classes and standard lists. And we can start to build reports off of those. Again, most of our reporting anyway is driving off of these lists. So we can actually build a report directly off of it. The nice thing about this is when we do this, we've got a few different options on it as well. Not only do we have the ability to choose a list, but we can also choose a page. So think about maybe a recruiter's dashboard. There's a lot of information on there, but we can use that and basically build a customized dashboard for somebody to use as a report. Absolutely fair game within the system. A couple other things that we've got on here. We're going to talk about the making it public in just a minute. But before that, there's also up here the ability for us to filter this report. Right away, we can sit here and build a report that says, okay, show me all the employees who were hired after January 1st, 2018. I'll build that filter right inside there, and we're going to be all set. We'll be on the road with it right away. We'll also be able to choose from live data or audit log data, which is huge when you get down to it. When we're talking about that historical reporting, it's always been, something that we need.
Yeah.
If you throw that as of date in, you're literally going to see, in the past, this is what the
system looked like on that day, as if you're going back in time to that day or forward in time to that day and bringing up the system and even just inquiring.
Exactly.
We'll bring all of that in.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the corollary to that as well is if I wanted to look into the future, I can also do that. Set that as of date out in the future, and I'm going to be able to see, let's just say that we know that we're going to be adding 15 new org units next week. Set the as of date for next week and see what that looks like organizationally. There's one little caveat on that. If you have like new hires coming in, they're not going to be showing up in that report with the as of dating. But other than that, a lot of other structural things are going to be showing up the right way.
And is that just because of the status that they're in, that if they're in a pending status, but if they were to go into a new hire status that was an active status with an effective date of the future, would they show up? Is that, or does it just not?
Right, it goes a little bit deeper and gets into some of the security aspects of it. So a lot of times when you do this, and we're going to talk about how this data is all actionable, if I expose, say, a new employee who's going to be reporting to you, and you open up that report and double click on it, all of a sudden you can see that data for that employee, which is great, but right now they don't report to you. So you shouldn't really see their pay rate. You shouldn't see some of their, say, employee relations history. So that's why it's kind of secured down that way right now.
Okay, good to know.
That's the best explanation I've heard for it. I'm sure that maybe somebody at Infor is watching and they'll say, no, that's totally wrong. But that's what I've been told. So.
Okay, so exporting. So we talked about all kinds of ways to get to data, but how about if we don't just need a report for ourselves, but we have managers or executives, somebody asking for that information that we need to deliver it to them. What are the manners to export them? So here we've got the easiest way. So that list view that we saw that Matt created and added the start date, he didn't create it, he added a personalization that added the start date, and you can add other fields to it. I want to take that list, maybe it is a department listing, and it'll show everybody who is active in a department that potentially somebody in benefits needs, because maybe they're going to be doing benefits orientation and they want to ensure they have folders for everybody or they have everybody set up, whatever it may be. You can go into that list and again, right clicking on your chevron gets you the menu to open everything, keys to the kingdom there. And you have an options, just like we did before, and you have an export CSV. You can export it to your CSV or to CSV or to PDF. And that way you're able to save it to your computer or save it to a network place and share it via email or however else, print it out, however you distribute reports at your organization. And talk about the private reporting?
Sure. So everything we've talked about so far, when we just created that report, I've created it and I didn't check that little make public thing, that little checkbox. So right now it's a private report. It's attached to my user record specifically. The nice thing is if I go and log in from somebody else's machine, I'm using somebody else's computer for the day, I still have that report because it's tied to my actor record.
And you'll see that in that start menu. So it's not going to disappear. It'll show up as a listed report in under your start reports section.
So there's a couple different places to see it. You'll either see it under My Reports or Reports. It all depends upon where you're accessing it through. So a couple different ways.
I think we've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Before
We do have a question, and it's a long one.
Okay.
Actually, two now. We're used to modifying a list in our own resource search, for example, and then publishing it as a report. But we've been having problems with those reports not working for anyone else who opens them. Are we supposed to go to this create report path now to create reports for others to use?
No, not necessarily. The publish should work, and Matt's going to get into the publish in one slide. So if we can hold on, we'll talk about that, and then we might talk about some troubleshooting options, or we might have to kind of get some more details from you.
Another question is we have I have a solution for this one, managed services. We have an Infor ticket open for this, so maybe it's an issue with this version we're on. So.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, that could be. Again, we'll see after we go through the next slide. If we haven't answered your question, we'll loop back and let us know.
One-on-one, get some more details from you and try and figure that one out.
Right. Okay, so yes, it's under My Reports or under Reports. We're going to be able to see it. I mentioned a few moments ago that this is actionable data as well. So I bring up this report. Let's say that I've built it off of the employee's work assignment. When I bring this up, I can see it. If I've got security access to actually perform actions, say do a promotion action or do a change pay rate, if I bring that list up, I actually will have those options right at the top of the screen. So I will be able to take actions directly from that report. So that's one of those things where, you can't do that quite simply in Crystal or through an ODBC connection.
It's super efficient because if you've got a whole list of people you need to do maybe a cost of living increase for, you want to do a pay increase, and now you have the list already filtered by the people who get that cost of living, you can now go systematically through that list and do your actions.
Exactly. All right.
Okay, now let's talk through the publishing that. So you were just talking about how you're able to see your report from wherever you go as long as you're logged into Lawson. So now I need a copy of it. Not just me, actually me and my whole team need a copy of that report that you've already filtered, and gives me and maybe some colleagues, managers that are at my same level, information about direct reports that we need for, we may be the same manager role over 3 shifts. How can I get that report that you've created?
Well, the first thing I'm going to be able to do is I'll go in and look at the reports that I've built out, and I'll right-click on it and I'll click on Edit. At that point, when I click on Edit, I've still got that button for Make Public. If I click on Make Public right there, it's now going to be available to your team, to everybody else in the organization. We'll talk about some subtleties on that in a couple minutes, but it is going to be available, and it will be actionable by everybody who's got access to that form.
Okay, looks like
Another
we've got a quick question.
The question might be a complaint, but not about us.
Okay.
Okay, so we're in the process of updating and found that the to export to PDF is now a multi-step process. Have you had any others complain about this?
I've seen maybe 2 clicks before, but I don't know if I've seen it as multi-step.
Yeah. So is it just determining whether it's portrait landscape? Is it, I don't know. We can also give us some more details on that, because I haven't heard any issues or any
Right.
yeah, any people that didn't like.
Yeah,
They're just happy to get to the information and PDF it and send it to people from where I stood.
I have seen where they do ask the portrait landscape, but it is actually in.
It's a setting that you
can. Yeah, one of the more recent versions as well. It almost has eliminated that piece almost.
Yeah.
So it is basically a 1 or 2 click. So, yeah, we'd have to look into it a little bit deeper, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so
yeah.
you told me the whole organization. So, ouch. What if there's stuff on there that I don't want like everybody else to see because there's employees that certain people may not need to see information about?
Right.
What happens there?
Yeah, and that's definitely a big concern when we're looking at any of the secure HR data. We always want to make sure that it's being published out there. It's out there for manager space. It's out there for employee space if it's published. And when we do that, the good thing is it is secure. Landmark security is always pervasive. No matter what, it's going to read who the person is who's accessing that data, and it will determine whether or not we can actually see it. So
Good.
yeah. So here's a quick report that we built out for employee credentials. You can see I'm logged in over there as an administrator, and I can see 3 records. I'm logged in over here as an employee, and I can only see the 2 records that I have access to. They happen to be my records as the employee.
That's nice.
So talking about a couple new functionality pieces, something that is very, very recent. I don't know exactly which version of 11 it is, but they've just pushed out actor group publishing. So when we were just talking about making things public, that was wide open. It was everybody in the organization.
Matt and I dealt with this years ago. Before Matt came to RPI, he worked at an organization, and I came out there to help with some security configurations. And we tried for weeks to figure out, it was a group of people that was more than 10, so we didn't want to publish the report out one by one. But it wasn't everybody in the organization, and we were trying to hack the heck out of that code to try and get just one group of people, a larger group of people, to get to that report. So, hey, spoiler, you don't have to hack the heck anymore. You want to talk about some of the new functionality here?
So the nice thing is they've put out this new actor group publishing. So I can create a custom group within GHR and say, all right, this group contains all managers. And at that point, I can build this report, and I'm going to say I'm making the report public, but you'll have an option for everyone or for a specific group or groups of groups. So when I do that, I can just expose that just in the manager group. The employee wouldn't even necessarily see that at that point. So that's really nice. And it's also tied into another nice feature, which is some automation of user provisioning, which is always been an issue with GHR. So that's some really nice new functionality that they've built in, and they're using it in both ways right now.
So if you want to find out a little bit more, I'm just going to do a little drop here. At 3 o'clock, Jackie and I are going to talk about the new functionality in later versions of 11, and we'll go into where that user provisioning and where this group setup and being able to use this group reporting functionality, where in GHR you're able to use it, and show you some more features in that. 3 o'clock.
All right, so why don't we move on and talk about the other things that were up at the top of the start menu when we said create. So one of the first ones was watches. Want to talk about that a little bit more? Or?
Yeah, so you know how you have your Amazon alerts or any other shopping that, I like to shop, and I don't like to pay full price for anything. So I use this site that gives me a little pop-up whenever anything, like this dress. If this dress went on sale, I would get a pop-up that says, hey, this sale at this store put this dress at 30% off or whatever it may be, and I know I can go purchase it. So a similar thing over here in the system. You can set up watches for whatever type of information. If a field value changes and you want to see when all the people who have moved from an active status maybe to a terminated or to a leave status, you can set a watch that is always constantly going out there and looking for that data change for you. You can schedule these watches. So maybe it's not instantaneous. Maybe it just shows up at 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock every day, so you know the next morning what your workload is going to look like based on the transactions that have occurred by the end of that day. And then
you've got the options where it will actually send her an email right away to say, hey, this is what the watch you were looking for, it's happened. Or you can just get one of those in-basket notifications up at the top of the rich client or the website. So definitely an option. One little proviso on this, you're going to get these emails I made the mistake one time of setting a watch up on our sandbox, and for the next 6 months, I was
Yeah.
getting an email every day
Like
of everybody in
all
our
the time.
sandbox named Olson. So proof of concept was right there.
Yeah, yeah. So you might want to digest them or schedule them to come out when they're actionable for you, or else, just like any other auto email, it'll get filtered into a folder in your outbox or your inbox, and then you may or may not take a look at it again if there's 100 of them that come, especially daily.
Right.
So
Yeah, especially for like the one-time things, they're amazing. If they're recurring things, definitely acceptable. Just watch out for the watches, I guess. So. You have a question?
Yes, we do.
Not too excited.
What version of GHR is the watch functionality available on?
It should be available from, I believe, 10.1 forward. So it was one of the first
I remember it in
functionalities.
10.2, but
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
So 10.1 or later?
Yes, I believe so. Yep. Okay, so one of the other things, this isn't really from that start menu view, but it really has to do with when we're looking at our data on a daily basis. So I can build this off of a report, I can build this off of a regular list that already occurs within the system. It is something that you can only do right now in the rich client. So it's really something more for a generalist or an administrator to do. Perhaps one of these days they'll roll it out to the web UI as well, but for the moment we're just going to be able to do that in the rich client. So what is this? So I've taken a list of all the work assignments, and I've already filtered it down. I said, okay, well, I want to see everybody in org unit 62. And I come over to our chevrons again, and I go to options, and there's a little button down here at the bottom called Detach to Canvas. If I do that, this list with those two people that I've already filtered down goes right onto the canvas as a little punch list for me to work through. These are the people I know that I have to do something on. So that was kind of a weird scenario that I laid out, but think about it this way. If you do that same thing to, say, your in-basket, and you wanted to see all the action requests that you have to approve in a certain day, if I detach that to Canvas, here's the 25 things that I have to do today. As I go through and approve them or deny them, they're falling off that list. When that list is empty, I'm done. So nice little functionality that a lot of people do not use.
Yeah, because sometimes you end up with like 30 little tabs up here.
You've seen my screenshots then, yes.
Yes, yes. And you're like, oh gosh, and you want to leave it open because you don't want to forget to do your work, but you get kind of sucked into other work that comes your way. So yeah, this is a nice, easy way to find it sitting.
Right.
It's like throwing something on your desktop. Also, something else I've seen of yours.
Yeah,
that
sorry.
has a lot of stuff.
Especially when it comes to those action requests, I do want to underscore one other thing. There's always been a question about like, well, can I show like the effective date of the action? Because that's something that's not available in the in-basket. If you're having that kind of problem, contact us. We can help you out with that. It's one of our very, very frequent customizations that we do for people. Configurations, sorry. Okay.
Okay, yeah, so we couldn't do a reporting presentation without Spreadsheet Designer. This is probably what you're currently using a lot of. If you didn't know about those other pieces that you could use, this is the easiest way to get to your data. For S3 users or anybody that isn't on GHR, this is essentially your Microsoft add-ins. Renamed it, rebranded it, Spreadsheet Designer, and you're able to go in there. Same thing like MS add-ins. You have a little function code, series of control shift click to get to your business class, and then you're able to define it. And I've got a question, I believe, so I think before we get too far.
We do. Yet another.
Okay.
What version is the Actor Group Publishing available?
It's 11 dot something. I believe it's 11.1.
I feel like it's come out in just this year, after January.
Yeah.
So if you are on cloud and you are getting the pushed updates from Infor, you should have it. If you are on premise, your version may not quite have it yet. It might be coming in the next release.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So more about Spreadsheet Designer. Remember, you do have the ability, just like Melissa was saying, with add-ins, you could always add in a couple extra relationships, other business classes, other tables. You can do the same thing in Spreadsheet Designer. I can also take this query, just like we said. If I save that query within the spreadsheet and I send that over to Melissa, if she's got security, she can open up that spreadsheet and pull down that same query. It's going to be live data for her right away. She'll be able to do it.
I'm totally not great at digging around finding one business class in 1200. So if my colleague already has it, I will definitely, again, all about efficiencies here.
Exactly.
It's not stealing, it's just efficiency.
Exactly. We are recycling.
Recycling, yes.
Yes, we're saving the LPL resources in the world.
Yes, and the same goes for your different environments, right? So I can create it and test, and you want to use it in prod, so I share it with you. You can just go in there and change out point it to the production environment, so it pulls the data, and you don't have to create a brand new query and split screen, try to remember exactly what your parameters were.
Right, and we'll see that a lot when we're talking about doing any kind of conversions or going from test to prod or rolling something new into the system. You're going to query it from your test system, and then you'll do an upload into your prod system. The one thing with Spreadsheet Designer is there's not a little logout button, so you actually do have to close out Excel fully and then log back in to the other server. It is one little hiccup, I think. Maybe
I don't know that it's a hiccup, only because it's scary sometimes that you again have 100 things open, you're doing things, you've pulled from your test system, you've opened prod, and you think you're going to be doing an upload into test to check it out, and you're on the wrong tab, you're on the prod tab or something, and so I can kind of see why that would be a good thing to do. It might take a little bit longer, but I think it makes everybody feel a little safer that when they're doing it. Tests, right. Queries, whatever, but when you're doing your uploads, you definitely want to have that security to know that you're in your test system testing out a query, an upload before you go over to your production.
Very true.
Yeah.
You could keep me on the leash here. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think it's my IT background. I'm always all about not doing anything to prod first.
So if you haven't seen Spreadsheet Designer before, this is what you're going to look like. You're going to insert the query. You're going to do a basic login. It's going to automatically know when you log in whether or not you can even see some of these business classes. We're going to be able to see it, but the other things that a lot of people ignore in this and can make your reporting a lot more effective if you're using Spreadsheet Designer. Remember that you do have filtration down at the bottom. First of all, you can set that as of date, which is huge. You can also add your filters right down there at the bottom and say, I want to only see HR organization this, or
relationship status. Yeah,
specific
that's a huge one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got that option. The other thing, which admittedly I always missed myself, and I went years using this product without realizing it, right up there where you're choosing the fields, there's a little tiny arrow. And if you click on that arrow, right now it's showing you in business class hierarchy order. You can click on that and actually reverse the sort order to be alphabetical or reverse alphabetical order. Literally 5 years of my life lost to that, not realizing that you could do that. So
You're like, it's changed my life.
It has. Now that I just got used to it. And then something else you can do is if you right click within any of those fields, you're actually able to add those related fields on there as well. So it's something that's very powerful. You can definitely make use of that.
Right.
Another question?
Yes. Can you automate data pulling with VBA, Visual Basic, i.e. having VBA change the as of date and run, and then are you off a different date, etc.? I think there's a typo. Run for a different date.
I'm not sure if there's been an extension for VBA to be able to do that. Do you happen to know offhand?
We don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we'll get you an answer and get it back to you. Thank you very much for that.
So we have about 9 minutes to 2 o'clock. We've got 6 slides to go. Let's make sure we get through them.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about reporting with Process Designer.
Let's try and do this in 9 minutes.
Okay.
That's going to be the big challenge.
All right. We can do this. All right.
Right on 9. People might log off.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So reporting with Process Designer. This is an incredibly powerful engine you've got there. It's sitting there on your in your talent management suite.
AKA, this is your IPA, Info Process Automation engine that's running this.
Right. So yeah, you've got a lot of different options within here. Anything that you can do in Process Designer, we can automate and get that information back out. When we're looking at building a report on Process Designer, we've got several different options. I can build out a whole bunch of queries and put together some message builders and things like that to just gather a whole bunch of data based on some parameters. When I do that, I've got that data then, it's saved in my process flow. I can send that directly to users. If I want to build a report that needs to be burst out and sent every Friday morning, here are all of our new hires for security changes, I can do that. I can take that information and I can export it to an attachment and then send that attachment to users right away. I can just send it straight up in an email. So you're seeing an example right here where we just burst out this nice little HTML table of here's everybody who is dispositioned from a talent acquisition standpoint.
So maybe you don't have employee space or manager space rolled out, or there are just some people who just don't get into the system. This is a nice way to be able to push those reports out without the publish action type
Absolutely.
thing.
Yep. And I've also seen this a lot to even supplement further the reporting that's already built in the system. Something like a qualifications report. Qualifications in the system will send out one reminder. If I need to do a reminder more than once, if I need to let myself know and my manager that, hey, my certification is expiring, and we want to do that at 90, 60, and 30 days, we can build a process flow to do that and notify her directly about me. And like I say, we can be very simple or very complex with the amount of data that we want to put out there. The big proviso on this is where the landmark security does not apply. As soon as I send that out in an email or put it into an attachment, your security is no longer there. So that's the one big thing to watch out for on it. So going further with it, just as we were just talking about as of dating, I promise that was not a planted question or anything. We can actually invoke the as of dating in the process flow itself as well. So if I want to do something like change reporting, or for that interface that runs from GHR to S3, I can build a report off of that and say, okay, well, we interfaced this record over, what were the values before and after? So here's a sample of a report where we built out, here's everything that's being interfaced over right now. Here's the changed fields. You can't see it on the webinar very well, I know, but we changed the pay rate from $17 to $19. We see the before and after, and the effective date and the reason codes. It's all tied in there, and we're able to query that through Process Designer.
And then that can help us for like any kind of reporting that's not, that we talked about at the beginning, not delivered. So you have some other state reporting that's specific for your state, and you need to get information from point in time to send to them multiple times throughout the year. This would be a good option for them, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you can schedule it, if you built it, you can schedule it, load it up, and get it done like that. So here's a sample of a process flow.
That's the scary part of it.
I think it's a beautiful part of it myself, but so this is just a sample process flow where it's going through and looking at data that's changed. I'm looking at our current data, and then I'm also able to look at our past data. So when I'm looking at the actual query string itself, I can invoke the variable to say what was the day before the effective date. I can get all that information in the process flow, not using VBA, not using anything else. I can just have it produced right there.
So for the end users out there, what this is showing you is, like you said, if you can think it and build it, process flow can do it. So you come up with some very strict requirements for your IPA developers and say, this is exactly the fields I need, this is exactly the dates that I need it pulled, and this is when I need it pulled, and this is who I need to go to. So instead of just kind of like, I need a state report, come up with all the variables that you'll need and all the requirements, and that'll make it a lot easier and quicker for somebody in IT to sign off and say, okay, yeah, we'll build this.
So if you're interested in more information about reporting through IPA, oddly enough, we have another webinar on that. Thursday morning at 11 a.m. So you've got one at 10 that you can watch, and then one at 11. The one at 11 is specifically about IPA reporting. So we've got Jeff House and Jeremy Stolfus coming in, talking about some options that you have within that as well. So,
And that one's going to be not just HCM, it'll be across
Right.
all suites and across Landmark and I'm not too sure which. So anyway, but yes.
So I
That'll
want
be
to go
good.
ahead and, if there are more questions, I think Matt and Melissa have some time to answer them. For those of you that have other things scheduled, I want to thank you for attending.